Welcome, hope you're doing well. We're going to talk about the multicultural life story of Tony Benn and the 5 character traits and reveal those highs and lows about his life as one of our most honest politicians who really cared about people. Hopefully it will inspire or even motivate you. And we only judge a person by their character, not race, colour or religion. So please click below the subscribe button to join our multicultural family if you are new. My name is Bobby A. Said. I am the founder of the MS Show, and I'm grateful to call Tony Benn a friend, who wasn't only one of our Emma finalists in 2004, but also supported what Emma stands for, with active participation in many of our events, as shown here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. The way I look at it is that every generation, from the beginning of time, have always had people there who campaigned for equality, for justice, for democracy, for freedom. And sometimes the campaigns succeed, sometimes they fail, sometimes they part succeed and part fail, but all of them leave behind a legacy that we can pick up and use. And what I remember most, and I think most people would say that, is the people who have really believed in what they've been doing and have sacrificed themselves and their lives often for that, and that gives an authenticity to what they did. And every generation has to fight the same battle. There's no final victory and no final defeat. And we're part there, but we're not there fully by any manner of means. And now, of course, for this generation, we have to look at it globally. When I was young at school, I remember one teacher saying there are only 2 sorts of people in the world, the British and foreigners. And there were an awful lot of foreigners. And now, I think increasingly young people see the world as one and see themselves as members of the human race. And as a member of the human race, you still have to take up these campaigns in circumstances that are more difficult, more diverse, but they're all occurring all over the world. And whether you're looking at the Arab Spring or whether you're looking back at the English Revolution, you'll find the same themes coming out. And the one advantage of seeing ourselves as members of the human race is that you realize that there is no inherent reason why you can't have human rights. It's just that there are human obstacles that have to be overcome.
Great, thank you very much, Tony. Now,
He is one of the most famous British politicians and writer, with his famous diaries when in government. For 47 years he was an MP for Bristol South East and Chesterfield, and would later serve as the president of the Stop the War Coalition from 2001 to 2014. His work as a politician made many regard him as a pivotal figure in British socialist politics, having been a major member of the Labour Party throughout his political career. He oversaw many posts, such as the opening of the Post Office Tower as Postmaster General between 1964 to 1966, and later as Minister for Technology from 1966 to 1970. Let's get a taste of the great man in action as he raises issues that many would be too scared to mention in our ever-divided world.
The BBC won't broadcast the appeal. I'm going to do it myself. Anyone who wants to contribute, I'm going to do that. And I'm sorry, you're not going to stop me. You're not going to stop me. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. The Disaster Emergency Committee Gaza Crisis is available at P.O. Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. And I know from the BBC, because I've been here most of the morning, nobody here agrees with what the BBC have done. 1,330 people have been killed, 460 children, 5,480 casualties, and the reason the BBC have done it is very simple. The Israeli government objected.
Well, the BBC would disagree with you, and you did hear the line from management there that it's a question of raising impartiality. The public will be concerned, and the other issue, of course, will the aid actually get to the people who need it?
Well, if you're telling me that if I send money to Gaza, the BBC's impartiality will affect. I'm sorry, I'm a human being.
If you send money to Gaza, though, through an appeal, can you be sure that it will get to the people who
Well,
who
in a
want
war
it and who
situation,
need it?
the Israelis have killed 1,330 people. Now,
Livni, the Israeli foreign minister, said there is no humanitarian crisis. Now be clear, the Israelis objected to the BBC. That's the reason. I've never met anyone, and I've done masses of meetings, I've never met anyone who doesn't think we should give aid to Gaza.
What about the other broadcasters who are also not showing it, though?
Well, they're wrong as well. But you see, we are human beings. I know you work for the BBC and I'm a pensioner. We're people. If you saw children dying as they are today in Gaza because there's no food, wouldn't you want to send it?
We have shown what's been happening in Gaza.
I know you've shown it, but I'm talking about helping people.
Yes, but surely people will see it and send the money anyway. What difference
does it make? They don't know the
make?
address, and that's it. P.O. Box 999, London EC3A, 3AA. I'm doing what the BBC won't do.
And you did it earlier as well, and I think people now know what the address is. Can we look at the bigger picture, though, as well?
Yes, of course.
What about targeting the aid going to the people who need it? What about the possibility that it might go to Hamas, that it might actually go to rearm?
Well, all right. Hamas is the elected government. In 2006, Hamas won the general election in Palestine. Jimmy Carter, the former American president, said that. And if you're telling me that no aid can go to people dying there in case it goes to a school run by Hamas, I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
How much money do you think the appeal will lose by not having the
BBC
and the other broadcasters broadcast?
Well, the Congo, they got 10 million, and I think in Burma 18 million. People will die because of the BBC decision. Let me be clear about that. And I started my life 60 years ago as a BBC producer. I love the BBC. I support it. But it has capitulated to Israeli pressure. That's the truth, I have to tell you.
Number 1. Hard working. Tony Benn was born in Westminster, London on the 3rd of April 1925. But him and his family had to move to Scotland for over a year due to the Thames flood in January 1928, which made their house inhabitable. Tony's father, William Benn, was a member of the Liberal Party and a member of Parliament from 1906 and later on the Labour Party in 1928. Then he would be elevated to the House of Lords. Tony Benn would be given the subsequent title, the Honourable. In 1942, his father would be given the title of Viscount Stansgate, which would soon be passed on to Tony in 1960. During the Second World War, he would lose his brother Michael, who was serving the RAF. Tony had gone on to join and trained with the Home Guard from the age of 16. In July 1943, he enlisted in the RAF as an aircraft man second class and would be granted an emergency commission as a pilot officer. On probation on the 10th of March 1945, where he would serve in South Africa and Rhodesia. It was in Rhodesia he would make his first solo flight at the RAF Guinea Fowl on RAF Elementary Flying Training School. He would relinquish his commission on the 10th of August 1945, 3 months after World War II ended in Europe and just days before the war with Japan had ended on the 2nd of September. On November 1950, he was selected to succeed Stafford Cripps at the Labour candidate for Bristol South East after Cripps stepped down due to ill health. Upon taking his oath after getting the seat, he became known as the baby of the house and the youngest MP for that time. Number 2. Resilient. As a son of Viscount Stansgate, his succession to the title prevented him from continuing to serve as an MP. Seeing his work was for the people more important to him than his peerage, he fought to remain in the House of Commons and campaigned for the ability to renounce his title. After 3 years of struggle, he eventually was successful, which would lead to the Peerage Act 1963. Through this act, he would be the first peer to renounce his title. He would then return to the House of Commons after winning a by-election on the 20th of August after resigning his peerage. This would be one of the many acts he would take, which cemented him as someone who was committed to creating institutional change. When newly elected as a Member of Parliament for Chesterfield during the by-election of the 1st of March 1984, he was criticised by the tabloids, such as The Sun. In spite of this, he would stand his ground as a Member of Parliament of the mining seat through his support of the 1984-1985 UK miners' strike. Even though the miners' strike would end in defeat, he introduced the Miners' Amnesty Bill in the House of Commons, which would have extended amnesty to all miners in prison during the strike. He was also strongly supportive of the gay rights, voting in favour of decriminalisation in 1967 and voted for the repeal of Section 28, a section of anti-gay legislation preventing the promotion of homosexuality, of the 1988 Local Government Act during the first term of Tony Blair's New Labour Party government. Tony Benn had denounced Section 28 ever since, even when introduced by the Thatcher government in 1988. On top of this, he voted in favour of equalising the age of consent. Number 3. Confidence. When Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands in April 1982, Tony argued the British government should not send a task force to recapture the island, instead suggesting the situation should be handled by the United Nations. While his analysis would be rejected by Margaret Thatcher, she would comment on his abilities as a communicator, stating that he put the freedom of speech to excellent use. Coming from an elite background, Tony would acknowledge his contribution to the Labour Party, and he would say, "I know the British establishment inside and out, and what they are up to." Indeed, even when Labour lost in 1979 general election, his influence within the party was strong enough to the point where a survey of delegates at the Labour Party conference in 1978 found that a large proportion supported Benn for leadership. In fact, the term Bennism came into use to describe the political, social, economical and the conviction policies of Tony Benn, with those in support being dubbed the Bennites. While Tony Benn would lose to Dennis Healey in September 1981 elections for the deputy leadership, the margin was less than 0.5%. His impact on political landscape is enormous, inspiring the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, alongside being selected as the UK's political hero in the BBC Two The Daily Politics programme in 2007. He narrowly beat Margaret Thatcher with 38% to her vote of 35%. The documentary Tony Benn, Will and Testament would win the Audience Award at the 68th edition of the Edinburgh Film Festival. Tony was known throughout his life to stand against policies and decisions he felt were unjust. He was strongly against the bombing of the Iraq in December 1998, condemning the affair immoral, with focus on the fact that such a decision would destroy families and cause the death of many innocent people.
I finish just by saying this. War is an easy thing to talk about. There are not many people of the generation that remember it. The Right Honourable Gentleman served with distinction. The last war I never killed anyone, but I wore uniform. But I was in London in the Blitz in 1940, living in the Millbank Tower where I was born. Some different ideas have come in since. And every night I went down to the shelter in Thames House. Every morning I saw Dockland burning. 500 people were killed in Westminster one night by a landmine. It was terrifying. Aren't Arabs terrified? Aren't Iraqis terrified? Don't Arab and Iraqi women weep when their children die? Doesn't bombing strengthen their determination? What fools we are to live in a generation for which war is a computer game for our children and just an interesting little Channel 4 news item. Every member of Parliament tonight who votes for the government motion will be consciously and deliberately accepting the responsibility for the deaths of innocent people if the war begins, as I fear it will. Now, that's for their decision to take. But this is a quite unique debate in my parliamentary experience, where we're asked to share responsibility for a decision we won't really be taking, with consequences for people who have no part to play in the brutality of the regime which we are dealing with. And I finish with this. On October the 24th, 1945, and the former Prime Minister from Bexley, Old Sidcup, will remember it, the United Nations Charter was passed. And the words of that charter are etched into my mind and move me even as I think of them. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save future generations, succeeding generations, from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has caused untold suffering to mankind. That was the pledge of that generation to this generation, and it would be the greatest betrayal of all if we voted to abandon the Charter and take unilateral action and pretend we were doing it in the name of the international community. And I shall vote against the motion for the reasons that I've given the House.
In 2003, he spoke against the war in Afghanistan, having been one of the leading figures of the British opposition since 2001. The 2003 demonstration on the topic would be the largest public demonstration in Britain's history, combining the efforts of the Stop the War Coalition, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament and the Muslim Association of Britain. He travelled to Baghdad to meet Saddam Hussein, where the interview was broadcast on British TV. He had also been in contact with Saddam Hussein before the First Gulf War, where he sought to release of the foreigners being detained as human shields. Towards the latter years of his life, he was elected as the president of Stop the War Coalition in 2004 and would be re-elected in 2008. Number 4. Passion. Even amongst his party, many have noted Tony Benn's radical approach to politics. He was a key proponent of democratic socialism and had even been described as being one of the few UK politicians to have become more left-wing after holding ministerial office. His brand of socialism was considered to be broad due to the wave of politics which hit the world after World War II, ranging from decolonisation, welfare state, campaign against the Vietnam War, the struggle for civil rights for the global black community and the nationalist community in Northern Ireland. As a result, Tony focused on returning wealth and power to ordinary people instead of the wealthy elites, a sentiment that echoed around the world today. It's clear that Bennism and Tony Benn had an impact on Corbynism to a new generation of socialist activists. However, Corbyn didn't have the charismatic or the communication skills that Tony Benn has. Tony proposed the Commonwealth of Britain Bill in 1981, which aimed to democratise the UK with his conviction towards helping those suffering under oppression. Even earlier in his career, he was a secretary of the Movement for Colonial Freedom founded in 1954, when many African countries were still British colonies. Indeed, the influence of his actions still rings to this day. His aforementioned famous speech against the MP's decision to bomb Iraq in 1998 resurfaced on social media decades later. However, this wasn't the only thing that appeared, with images of Tony Blair and George Bush, Iraq war loving, alongside Tony Blair's image in Iraq as photoshopped to highlight the consequences. Number 5. Humility. During his lifetime, he was renowned for his abilities to command words with clarity and above all honesty. It was argued by The Guardian former political editor Michael White that Tony Benn's only rival as a communicator with Labour voters was Tony Blair. Even when considered a divisive political figure in British and Irish politics, he earned the respect of his enemies through his ability as an orator. Samuel Wilson of the Democratic Union Party acknowledged, "I may have hated every word he said, but I have to admit he said it with style." In 2003, London DJ Charles Bailey created an album of Benn's speeches set to ambient groove. His communication skills were not only apparent as an orator but as a writer too. He was a prolific diarist with 9 volumes published. He also made several episodes of audio diaries during his time in Parliament, and after retirement these would be known as the Benn tapes. Broadcasted originally on BBC Radio 4 on the 5th of March 2019, a large political archive of Benn's speeches, diaries, letters, pamphlets, recordings and ephemera had been accepted in lieu of 210,000 inheritance tax allocated to the British Library. This further cemented Tony Benn's legacy, not only as a forward-thinking politician who was not only radical for his generation, but a man with a gift for words and above all honour. He sadly died on the 14th of March 2014 at 88 years old. Ultimately gone, but never forgotten. In summary, Tony Benn had a very strong influence on the Labour Party and overall the British political landscape as we see it today. On top of this, the lasting impact of his work continues to resonate with both the old and the younger generation around the world. Despite butting heads with the many in the political sphere, he remained in high regards for his actions against two of the most prominent wars of the last 2 decades, the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, alongside his seemingly quieter but equally lasting actions against injustice through numerous legislations to promote human rights. Many within his party also held him in high regards, including Ed Miliband, who regarded him as a champion of the powerless, a great parliamentarian and a conviction politician. Former Labour MP Tony Blair noted that despite his disagreements, he always had enormous respect for his brilliance, his passion that mirrored the people of Britain and around the world who didn't share his politics. Why don't you leave us a comment and share your own thoughts about Tony Benn and let us know if we have missed anything. Would really appreciate a like or even a subscribe, and please donate on Patreon, however little the amount, to support this channel's ongoing mission to undertake our multicultural campaigns. And remember, it's what's inside that counts, a motto we have used at the Emmas. Here is a footage of the great Tony Benn that sums up his political career, who is a humanitarian compared to those many corrupt politicians we have today around the world. So until next time, thank you for watching and keep it multicultural.